very generously asked me to read a poem from my own book, so I'm going to do that.
Yeah, no, Frisia, this is what, your third chapbook now?
This is my third chapbook, yeah.
And it's out from what, Bottle Cap? Bottle Rocket?
Water's Edge Press.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm confused. I'm a book behind.
No, that's okay. So I was looking through this collection and I was thinking about what poem to read for this book launch event. And so actually this is a poem about community and connection, and also a poem about loneliness and silence. So I'll read this poem. The title is called "This Land Will Always Be Here for You." Even if the city falls, even if just in memory, even if submerged by polar melt, even if the city becomes filled with an old kind of hate, this land's a prime number, an example of sticking around. When you are here, you leave your soft impressions everywhere, in the oldest parts of the house, in the way sidewalks wear your shoes, the way you've been in town long enough to know laws are based on limited logic. Last night, a movie of rain. Last night, igniting your batteries. And you ran toward the old city's tribute, longing for recognition of what this land might mean collectively, though the officials with their umbrellas and clipboards had already decided what to inscribe on the plaque. Official has never meant accurate here. This land doesn't need a second memory. The land is its memory. So, thanks. Thank you. So we were thinking in a little bit we'll have some Q&A with you all, with the audience. We were thinking it would also be fun to read some brand new work. And so I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Okay, I'm gonna read a poem. This is a newer poem. It's very different from what's in the book, but anyway, I sitting around talking about what poem you're going to read is one of the worst things possible, isn't it? Anyway, people keep telling me I look like Jason Momoa. For those of you who don't know, that's the actor who plays Aquaman. And this is actually something that keeps happening to me, is that for some reason I'll go someplace and somebody will look at me and go like, "You look a lot like Jason Momoa." And I'm like, I don't get it. But people keep telling me I look like Jason Momoa, which I don't get. But I've heard it enough that I can't help but think there is something to the idea. But it doesn't quite make sense to me. I know I'm not built like Jason Momoa, but I guess it could be there's some resemblance between our faces, the shapes of our noses, or perhaps how our eyes are set. I cannot say I know that. I haven't noticed it, but really, I guess any two people look more alike than not, if you consider it, what with us being people, and that bringing more commonalities, with us all having some things that are the same, some human form, with a similar kind of face, and a general structure, a shape, or range of shapes. I mean, any one of us looks a bit like Jason Momoa if you're comparing them to houseplants, or luxury motorhomes, or the country of Ecuador.
Yeah. I love the humor in your poetry, William.
Oh, thank you. I feel like this book is a little dry on that sense. It doesn't have as much.
It's in a more reflective mode, right? And so I think that's why it's great for you to be able to read some new work, because we can see some of the other directions that you're going to go in future books. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have
I do. Yeah, I have a new poem.
This looks brand new.
Well, I wrote it out by hand because I didn't have a printer in the hotel room. So this is an ode, which is a poem of praise, a tribute poem. And speaking of kind of, putting positive energy into the world, it's a sapphic love poem because that's the energy that I'm trying to put into the world. So this is called Ode to Your Eyelashes. When you wash off your makeup, after brushing your teeth, your blonde eyelashes become a soft new horizon I want to measure with my mouth. You're heading to bed, but I kiss you before we get there at your eyelashes' edge. You might remind me that mites live there, on your eyelids, I mean. Our own tiny neighborhoods. You'd be the one to tell me trivia like that. You seem to know something surprising about every beautiful, fragile thing. The biome of your eyes, our body's ecosystems, mayflies and pandas and marshes and lakes. Me, I don't have trivia, but description. Of course, I'll visit the field of your lush face when I can't sleep. Pale sunned, watered, freckled under your eyes. Sublime, fine dust of the moon. Smooth husk of beetle, pecan, brush of waxy spring leaf. Before the world, I'll wake, early, perfectly, and see you.
Now I just want to talk about lists.
Yes.
But,
we could talk for so long. This has been one of the really beautiful things about this friendship, collaboration, colleagueship, is there's just always so much to talk about. But we're going to pause here and we're going to turn it over to all of you to see if you have any questions for William about poetry, about the writing process.
Or for Frisia.
Or for me. Yeah.
Please, I see a hand.
I do. Is it unusual in a book of poetry? I mean, you talked about having a totality of a book.
Right.
And I normally assume that a book of poetry is a collection of poems.
Right.
Is this unusual?
I mean, I think there's a combination. I can think of a lot of books where a poet has a specific project that they're doing in a book. There are certainly like poets like Taye Himba-Jess, who pretty much every one of his books is a large project. He's sort of a historian poet in a certain way. And there are a number of people who do that kind of thing where they will pick a specific subject. Ellen Bryant Voigt wrote a book that was entirely about the Kyrie flu epidemic in the early part of the 20th century. And it's a beautiful book.
It has become relevant, right?
Yeah, it's
epidemic. Yeah.
That book is devastating. I think you're right. And I think part of that is also the fact that, like, as poets, so much of our careers is about periodicals, about like publishing individual poems, that it becomes hard. Like if you were a novelist and you had to only publish a chapter from a book at a time, it would be much harder to write a book that was a cohesive thing. You'd have to write chapters that were stories that people could read on their own. So I think that there is an element of that. I also think that like a lot of the time when we're reading poetry books, we're reading like collected works, not necessarily a book that was put together by the poet intentionally, but more like these are the poems from this poet that have been collected into this book, sometimes posthumously, sometimes just by an editorial team who is just working from, whatever poems that poet has. When people talk to me about this book and the structure of it, one of the things that comes to mind for me is Blake. And I wasn't thinking about it when I was working on the book, but Blake certainly has The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, where there's two halves to the book and the poems in the first half mirror the poems in the second half. I mean, literally he has the lamb and the tiger, and at the end of the tiger he goes and references the lamb poem to say like, these poems go together. There is a tradition of that. And I mean, obviously epic poetry holds to that, but I don't think that it's necessarily the way most poets put their books together. And I think it's sort of something that kind of came to be working on this book. It wasn't the intention to put it into that form, but it sort of developed. And for me, I think that was the magic of putting this book together, was that it did rise into something cohesive in that way.
It's a great question, and it's a hot topic in poetry land.
So,
do you write a project book or do you write individual poems?
Can I ask you, when you think about this, do you think of this as a cohesive book or as individual poems.
Blaze Without Burning?
No, City of Honesty,
City
your
of
book.
Honesty. I write poems individually, and it takes years. So this took 5 years of not continuously working on it, but returning to it over and over. And over time, you kind of realize the poems belong together in the same family. But your point about publication is really interesting, because we usually do send one poem or a couple of poems out to venture off in the world on their own to see if we can get them published individually. And then we're in a different mode when we're trying to put collections together.
I think working on this book and looking back on it, I've been thinking of it as sort of a collage process, that process of putting a book together, because it's like you have these elements that exist that already are there, and you're sort of trying to put them together into a larger piece without entirely creating something new. It's trying to, fit those things into something larger as a pattern. I don't know if that answers what you're...
There's another question over here. Yeah.
This is my brother, by the way.
Hello. I'll start out with a bit of praise. The poem that you keep on referencing about the pocket dial, the mirror poem to that, when I read that poem, the sense of being alone, but the cat just died, and like you're hearing the phantom noises, like that really, I could feel those emotions. I've been
Well, thank you.
in that situation where you're hearing noises and you're alone, but my question for the question side is the interlude poem in the middle
Sure.
that does not have a mirror. What was the reasoning behind choosing that poem? What was the mentality, the mindset?
Well, I mean, I think for me, part of it is, if you really want to be literal, I think of it as a piece of a dream in a literal sense. And if you look at the book, the poems that come directly before and after that are poems that literally the title of each one is A Restless Night Continues. And there's this moment in the middle where it's like you fall asleep and you have this peaceful dream moment, and then you wake back up. And so like that's kind of on a literal level. As I said, I kind of think of this poem as sort of a garden of sculptures. And I sort of feel like that's like the moment in the middle of it where you get to the center of that garden and you just sort of have that place where you sit down for a minute and just enjoy being there. And you're going to take the rest of the journey back, but you just take a moment to pause in the middle. But that was sort of, I guess, how I thought about it. Does that?
Yeah.
Mom?
How did you come up with the title?
Well, it's a line from the poem, from one of the poems in the book. And
You could have taken a line from any of them.
yeah, I was saying earlier, sometimes, you're looking for an answer to a question, and when the right answer appears, it's like, that's it, you got it. And I think the publisher accepted the manuscript on condition that I find a better title for the manuscript, because the original title was kind of a placeholder. And they had given me a few suggestions, and I wasn't really certain that they were right. So I sat back and I read through the book. And that image of Blaze Without Burning, first of all, it felt like it fit the book. It felt like that was kind of the theme, that this is a book very much about that dichotomy we were talking about earlier, that line, that balance between destruction and energy, and being able to risk enough without it becoming so much that you consume yourself, that you become overwhelmed and destroyed. So I think that was a large part of that image, and that resonance struck me when I found it in the book.
It's a great book title, isn't it? Like visceral, provocative, energetic. It's really, really good.
And it's actually a phrase. You look it up.
Yeah.
It's like,
How did you know when you were finished with the book? Is there more content that you wanted to add but decided didn't make the cut? Or is there just like a definitive point where you're like, this is exactly what I want, no more, no less?
Well, I mean, I think I was really lucky. Frisia came to me with a group of poems that already existed and said to me, I think these poems work together. Even before I started, I had the book in that sense. That doesn't answer your question in terms of trying to work on the book and make it cohesive and effective. And, we were talking last night before dinner, it's very easy to sort of over-revise and keep going. I think part of it is, one, I had somebody else to bounce it off with and to say to me, this is working, this isn't working, you need to keep going, you're done. Because you can never trust yourself entirely with that kind of thing. It's that line between the artist part of you and the ego part of you, right? I think also that at a certain point, you kind of have to just step back and say, okay, if I keep going at this point, I'm just keeping going because I'm not comfortable. I feel like I've done enough. And if somebody sees it and they'll respond. And if there needs to be more work done at that point, I'll have an editor who says to me, hey, we need to do this, that, and the other thing. You know what I mean? I sort of trust that a little bit. Honestly, you just get to that place and you say, okay, if I keep going, I'm going to drive myself batty and never feel satisfied. So you just sort of stop. Who is it? Paul Valery about works of art are never finished, they're abandoned. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's 10 people who are credited with that quote, but yeah. So it's something like that, which is not a satisfying answer, but it's the only one we have.
We probably have time for one more question, and I see a hand in the back.
Well, it's going to be a two-part. First of all,
we'll allow it.
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask, there's all types of writing you can do in this world. What made you both choose poetry?
I mean, first of all, I don't know that I chose poetry.
Did poetry choose you?
No, I mean, first of all, I think some of it is just circumstance. I was randomly in a place in my life where someone said to me, you need to be writing poems right now. Literally, I was in 4th grade-ish, 3rd or 4th grade, and I had a teacher. One of her things was I teach poetry to my students. And she had students read and write poems. And I was always a literary kid. I was always a reader. I remember when I was very little reading A. Milne poems and being very they're not the most serious poems, but I mean, if you look at some of the A. Milne poems, he's doing some crazy stuff for children's poetry. I mean, Disobedience, which is an amazing poem, ends with this stanza that is basically a typographical joke. The poem, the last stanza, cannot be read out loud, basically, because it's all just typography. Those were things that were in my head from very early on. And I think I just had the right teacher start me doing it when I was at the right age, that it became a bug.
That's great. The teacher inspired you.
Mrs. Melnick, who lived on LaGuardia Place.
Nice. Yeah, I think for me, poetry honors contradiction and how two things can be true at the same time that contradict one another. And there's not many other places or spaces I've found that honor that contradiction, which I feel deeply and which I think all of us feel often. I also think a lot about how we all start out as children, and childhood is really scary. It's scary to encounter the world and to not know how to navigate it. And so I do, as I get older and older, feel like, I don't know, like my poet self is very in touch with that child self, and fear and bravery and resilience. All of those things come up a lot in poetic practice. Thank you all so much. Let's give it up one more time for William Miller.